Okay. My watch keeps me honest. It's a great privilege to be here. I love this place. These were great years for my wife and I. So with that, let me just give a bit of a background. Yes, graduated from the Kansas University, and from there met my wife. We were part of Campus Crusade for Christ. Met my wife Tiffany through that ministry. When we graduated, we went on staff with the ministry to Athens, Georgia, University of Georgia, for 2 years, 97 and 99. Great years on staff, but in those years, under our pastor Hal Farnsworth, encouraged me towards Covenant. So 99, transitioned here, did the MDiv plus MAC, graduated 04, and along the way had 4 kids, but they're with grandma right now, so my wife and I, freedom. Anyway, but then we transitioned after seminary years back to the church that we were part of at KU, Grace EPC, same pastor that officiated our wedding, and so for us it was like returning to the promised land. So I've been doing college ministry at KU now for 7 years in the context of a local church. Now, quick disclaimer on what I want to do as I talk about college ministry and how to think through what we do and why we do what we do. Disclaimers, I recognize a lot of you are coming from probably college ministry backgrounds. And my guess is either you come from RUF or, because this is the PCA seminary, you will be familiar with, if not already, you will in the future become familiar with RUF stuff. Love RUF, love their philosophy of ministry, so I will not be repeating a lot of that stuff, obviously. But to recognize that no matter what philosophy of ministry we're talking about with college ministry, we should always approach with great teachability and humility of recognizing that we always have things to learn. I recognize increasingly always more things to learn. So with that, what I will be speaking out of is my own context of working within a particular church in a particular Lawrence community, which is different than a lot of communities, and within a particular group of students. So my hope is that some of the things I share may not translate directly to you if you go into college ministry, but hopefully enough of it that will help out. Began asking the question 7 years ago when I started at KU, what do college students need to thrive? What do they have to develop in the critical years, the university years, to thrive for the rest of their life? Now, the minute you ask that question, there's great challenges. For instance, our students, and I'll just name a few, we could go on all day about the challenges that we face in a university setting. But one thing that is very real is Christian Smith coined the term moralistic therapeutic deism. How many of you are familiar with that term? Yes, quite a few of you. Moralistic therapeutic deism. It is a very telling expression that essentially the students, what God wants from them, many of our students believe, is just essentially to be good, to be happy, and to feel good about themselves. And God is, maybe directly involved in their lives at some point. Okay. Huge challenge for us in that kind of context of college ministry. Also, the other reality is just a faith that is cafeteria-style faith of picking and choosing various things. And even if they have faith, it's not always obviously strong faith. There's so much to build into them in these years, but especially they have such a lack of a grasp of how to integrate their faith with their learning in the college years and what all that means for them to flourish for the rest of their lives. And on top of that, you could go on to name the challenges of alcohol abuse and gender confusion and sexual promiscuity and all that goes with all that. So much of that, as we know, really comes down to issues of belief. Everybody observes these behaviors, but for us we have to understand what are the belief systems underlying this and how do we go through, how do we approach all this, the challenges that we face? What I want to do is I want to pull from a couple of very influential thinkers, people that have really shaped my thinking of how I do my philosophy of ministry in our context. One of them, Steve Garber. How many are familiar with the name Steve Garber? Fabric of Faithfulness. Love that man. This book transformed my life. In seminary, I was in my last year of seminary. I was leaning towards college ministry. My joke was always that I've always felt like college ministry was the thing for me because I just wasn't mature enough to do the adult world. Then I realized it's actually a calling, so it made me feel much better about myself. But anyway, but what Steve Garber did in this book, as I was reading it, he got the essence of what I believe college students desperately need to develop. And what this book is about, he tracked many college students 20 years beyond their university experience and saw the ones that were flourishing. What did they have in common? And what he found was three things: convictions, character, and community. By way of convictions, they were taught a worldview which was sufficient for all the questions and the crises that were going to take place in their life, especially in a society that is very secular and very pluralized. Okay. So with that, if we boil that to the university years, we recognize students will run into, with their convictions, they'll run into, this will be oversimplified, but a couple of different worldviews that are at play in the university. One is modernism. Man alone will solve problems. Man alone, through evolution, through technology, through education, we will be able to figure out all of life, and everything will be great. And that is what drives the university in many ways. But that's not the only one. There's also postmodernism. As you all know, postmodernism, that there's no true truth. Okay. You guys, I trust you recognize modernism and postmodernism. But what gets interesting with this is for our students, there is no serious place for the gospel to be considered in a university setting. Because for the modernist, they think special revelation, I have to be able to test it. There's no place for special revelation, okay? But for the postmodernists, they're all about spirituality, but the minute you start making exclusive statements, then they start backpedaling. Well, at this point, think about your own lives as college students. Think about the college students that we work with. What I see over and over again with our students, even our solid ones, is they really do have, I think, an inferiority complex on our campuses. Because they may believe these things, but they don't necessarily know how to articulate it. And at the end of the day, they're not absolutely convinced. And when I say that, they may be 99% sure of the absolute claims of Christ. But but honest conversations at times reveal, but what if we're wrong? And so for us, how do we help our students against these worldviews in the university, modernism and postmodernism? How do we really help our students to solidify their faith, their convictions, as Garber talks about? So convictions, the other one is character. And when Garber speaks of character development, he is talking in reference to people, older men and women in their lives as mentors who embody the Christian life and point them to the good life, the faithful life. And I see this in campus ministry a lot, the temptation, even when we're part of a local church, to think in terms of our resources as what I can do, or interns that I might be able to hire on, or other staff. But what about our local church context with mentors, with meals? I was in a conversation with a student just the other day. He said he's had 2 meals in the homes of families he's in his third year of college. And those meals were some of his most significant experiences in college so far. Wow. The power of families. Panel discussions of various topics with our church members, being able to speak to our college. We've done a couple of these with older women in our church to our younger college women. It's been fantastic. Then there's, leading Bible studies, calling our students to serve in our local churches alongside older and wiser and godlier folks. And so that reality of convictions, also, again, character through mentors. The third one he speaks of is community. And that's an obvious one, that our students, grow in the context of communities. So we need to develop flourishing communities for them where they will be challenged, supported. So Garber, with his convictions, character, community. Here's another one that has been very, very influential to me. And if I can write it by way of the board, Francis Schaeffer, Many of you know that name, I trust. That's a joke. Okay, so we got Schaeffer, who, 3 concentric circles. He talked about this in many ways, what Garber speaks of and what Schaeffer spoke of. This is how I think through ministry philosophy and programs that fly out of this. Okay, in Schaeffer's book, No Little People, page 75 to be specific, he speaks of the 3 circles of development in a person's life. One, he refers to as correct, and I just never spell anything out because my brain's, okay. Correct theology and biblical orthodoxy. Okay, correct theology, biblical orthodoxy. So important, as you know, for our college students to continue to develop these and see the importance of these. The next circle he talks about is his specific wording, good intellectual training and comprehension of our own generation. So good intellectual training. And by the way, the minute that you're on a college campus and you begin speaking about intellectual things, you recognize we're fighting against a culture oftentimes with students where they don't necessarily want to think deeply. But how do we encourage them to think deeply? Intellectual training and comprehension of our current generation. The third one he speaks about, humble heart. That we can have these 2 in place, and it's a seedbed for pride. But we have to be developing great Bible theology, great training of the culture that we live in, but in the context of a humble heart. And I tell you, my challenge that I continue to see in my own life is, as I lead students, what does it look like in my own life? What does it look like for the Lord to continue to develop in me a humble heart so that these other things, what bleeds through is love. Great love for our students, great love for our community as we go. So, with all these, I can boil down conversations I've been having recently with students is along the ideas of developing orthodoxy, right thinking, orthopraxy, right living, but orthopathy, right affections. And if you ask students what they're geared towards in college, what their Christian circles often what they're really about, what they emphasize, it tends to be the affections, or actually emotions, and practical training, but we don't always fully get the right orthodoxy. And so the importance of developing this. So, what do students need in the 4 or more years before they graduate? With all this, for my own sake of boiling things down, what I want to give students, to the best of my ability by God's grace, is I would say 7 things, because 7's a biblical number. Okay, I'll run through the 7 things and then explain a little bit further how we do it. One is just an increasing comprehension of redemptive history, to know Genesis through Revelation. Okay, the second one, theological depth, which leads to doxology, which leads to praise. The third one, relational wisdom. They're all about relationships, but they do it very foolishly in the college years often. So how do we cultivate a great culture of how do we do relationships well? The fourth one would be a Christian mind, critical thinking. Our college students do not know how to critically think, okay? How do we help them to think, especially in a couple of categories, with respect to vocation, their callings in life, whether it is their family, it is their church, it is the sphere of society, and especially their work. Okay. The other one, how do we develop critical thinking with respect to worldview, apologetics, things of that nature? Fifth one, to love the church, to really love the body of Christ and to serve it well for a lifetime. Sixth one, ministry and life skills like evangelism, discipleship, leading Bible studies, things of that nature. The seventh one, missions and service, ministry training along those lines, and especially the weightier matters of the law. Okay, I breezed through those. So here's what I want to do with our time that's left, is go through. I handed out a sheet of paper most of you should have this, that one side says Sunday school, the other side says Waffles and Worldview. So these are some of our two primary means of our ministry programming that we do with students that we have found to be fairly effective in their lives of developing some of these principles. And so my hope is I looked at this from, if I'm in your shoes and I'm graduating and I'm going to go, either your church has some college students and you want to develop something in, or you are going to be a college pastor or RUF or something in some capacity, what do you actually do? Where do you get started? I love being a thief. I steal from people all the time. So if there's anything on here you can steal from, have at it. So here's what we do. We do an 8-semester curriculum with our college students, knowing that most of them, they're there 4 or more years, but I want to give them essentially seminary boiled down, seminary for all for our students. And so we do a breakfast, we fix them. I got a team of people that fixes them a great meal. It's my highest budget, but it's important because it gets them in the door. Is it a bait and switch? Kind of, but I'm okay with that. So we will, so we get them in the door with breakfast, but also I will go through 2 semesters of the Bible, going through, obviously, from Genesis to Revelation. Because if they do not understand the overarching meta-narrative, God's big story, they're going to get caught up in lesser narratives, and they do. And so we constantly have to get that through to them. And so, obviously, books like The Honorable Dr. Williams, Far as the Curse is Found. Another one, Drama of Scripture. And I won't, you can read these for yourselves. And you might have other books that are better. If you do, please email me and let me know. Okay, that's great. The other one, another semester, year 2, would be Systematic Theology. And that just basically helping students understand and love theology, leading to a humble heart, doxology. Salvation Belongs to the Lord. I found that book by John Frame, and obviously I use all the Covenant Seminary stuff, but this one has great handles for a college student to read through. The way that it breaks it down. It's perfect for like a year-long Sunday school class. Okay, another semester of Examined Life, Maturity and Relationships. In this class, I spend at least 7 or 8 weeks on gender issues, using Grudem and Piper, Rediscovering Biblical Manhood and Womanhood. That continues to be a topic that we have to go through so often with our college students. There is such confusion in that realm. The other next semester would be a semester on calling, on vocation. And this is, by the way, I have books up here that we use. If any of you afterwards have any questions about this. The ones that Dr. Guthrie passed on to me, Heavenly Good of Earthly Work, God at Work. These 2 books, I have been a wonderful, rich semester of having conversations with students about the fact that their studies actually matter. God is actually concerned with this and what this means for the rest of their life. Okay? Then 1 semester on the book of Revelation. That is what we're currently in, which it's so good for our college students to recognize what Revelation is about and is not about, but especially worship and the fact of what God is doing as reigning victoriously and just what this means for their life today. Okay, and then 1 semester, True Spirituality is what I call it, where whatever I've thought about that I would like to do, I'm just going to throw in that semester. Okay, flip over, next sheet. We do what we call Waffles and Worldview on Sunday nights. We really want our students to wrestle through the issues of the day, the current issues of the day and the things that they're going to wrestle through. And we find oftentimes on campuses, nobody is dialoguing with them about these things. And so our students have gravitated towards this and love it. I think this might be the best thing that we do. Okay, we do a semester of the history of worldviews. We do Schaeffer's DVD series where, the man's wearing knickers. Our students love it. And just the conversation about our culture and where they've come from. We do a semester on understanding the historical Bible. In a sense, tackling that issue, if the university, when they go after Christianity, it's either taking the legs out from under Jesus or the Bible. So we spend a semester really digging into the historical Bible. The next semester, modern worldviews in the university, what are we swimming in? We tackle all the isms, consumerism, individualism, naturalism, modernism, postmodernism, and we help them to see it's not out there, it lives in you. And how do we think through, and again, I've got books there that have been helpful to our students. We do a semester, whereas modern worldviews in the university, kind of the things that assail us from outside, we do swerving from Christian doctrine. What are some of the issues that come up within our own churches? And so you can see some of the topics underneath that we hit. Obviously a big one right now is heaven and hell. Certain authors recently have wrote on that topic and made it quite a lightning rod issue. Other things, Christianity and economics. In other words, we're not about the health and wealth gospel. We're not about selling everything, and the only way to be a true Christian is selling everything and live with the poor. How do we think this biblically? So taking things within our own church, Christianity, and saying, how do we wrestle through this? And then another semester on the historical Jesus, of really tackling those issues. So part of the Q&A, we can flesh some of this out more, but the idea is God has gifted, what a great gift to be able to get the education that we have, but we have to be able to pass this on and do it in a way where our college students can recognize the beauty of great growth in their intellectual training of the day, understanding that correct theology, correct Bible, but always leading to a humble heart. So from there, let me stop and we can begin the Q&A time.